6 months had passed since the Battle of New Sol. The galaxy was still adjusting to what that victory meant. The council chambers, once a place of comfortable routine for ancient species, was now filled with tension and uncertainty. Captain Hyun-woo, promoted to admiral after New Sol, stood before the council again. This time he was not alone. Beside him stood representatives from 17 species that formed the Alliance of Free Worlds. The Velara were there, as were the Myrani, the Thel, and others who had chosen courage over comfort. Councillor Vexthor of the Luminari looked down at the gathering with his ever-present glow. You request formal recognition of your alliance. This is unprecedented. The Council has maintained peace through unified authority for 10,000 years. The Council maintained peace by allowing the strong to prey on the weak. Hyun-woo replied calmly. The Krell expansion was only stopped when someone decided to fight back. That's not peace. That's just slow extinction. A younger counselor, one of the Thel who had recently switched their allegiance to the Alliance, spoke up. We have data on Krell activity over the past 6 months. Their expansion has completely stopped. They've withdrawn from 3 sectors they had occupied. Fear of encountering Alliance forces has done what millennia of Council diplomacy could not. Engineer Unji, now promoted to Chief Director of Human Fleet Engineering, presented technical documentation to the Council. We've been sharing our technology with Alliance members. Not weapons, but engineering principles. How to push systems beyond their rated capacity. How to make repairs with limited resources. How to keep fighting when everything looks hopeless. And they're teaching us their methods in return. The Velara have acoustic sensors that outperform anything we've designed. The Myrani have biological computers that process tactical data faster than our best AI. She pulled up a holographic display showing collaborative projects. This is what happens when species work together as equals instead of hiding behind ancient hierarchies. Innovation, adaptation, progress. Commander Tae-yang, who had been promoted after his defense of New Sol, added his perspective. The Council asked what we want. Recognition is only part of it. We want the Council to remember what it was built to do. Protect sapient life, all sapient life, not just the species with seats in these chambers. Admiral Jiwon, attending via holographic projection from Earth, delivered the final argument. 6 months ago, the Krell were expanding unchecked. The Council debated while people died. Today, the Krell are contained and defensive. 17 species have joined the Alliance of Free Worlds. 23 more have expressed interest. We're not asking permission to exist. We're telling you that the galaxy has changed and you can either adapt with us or be left behind. The Council chambers fell silent. The ancient species had ruled for so long that being challenged was almost incomprehensible. But the data was undeniable. Alliance forces had engaged Krell units in 12 different encounters over the past months. Every encounter had ended with Krell retreat. The hive mind species, which had terrorized the galaxy for decades, was now avoiding conflict. Councillor Vexthor dimmed his light, a gesture of something close to respect. You have forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, Admiral Hyun-woo. We accused you of barbarism, of recklessness, but your barbarism saved 2 billion Velara. Your recklessness created a coalition strong enough to stop the Krell. Perhaps, he paused, something his kind rarely did. Perhaps we have lived so long that we forgot the value of what we were protecting. Another ancient counselor, a digital consciousness from the core collective, spoke. You force us to choose between our pride and our purpose. If we deny you recognition, we prove your accusations correct. If we accept you, we admit our methods were insufficient. Hyun-woo allowed a slight smile. We're not asking you to admit failure. We're asking you to remember success. The Council was founded to protect life and promote cooperation between species. The Alliance is doing exactly that. We're just doing it with methods you've forgotten. The vote took 2 days of deliberation. In the end, the Council officially recognized the Alliance of Free Worlds as a legitimate coalition within galactic space. It was not a surrender, but it was acknowledgement that the old order had to change. The ancient species maintained their seats and their prestige, but they also agreed to new protocols, mandatory response times for distress calls, military intervention clauses for genocide scenarios, and the acceptance that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. On New Sol, reconstruction was well underway. The city that had been nearly destroyed was being rebuilt with help from dozens of species. Velara architects designed beautiful water features and memorial parks. Myrani engineers constructed buildings that could withstand orbital bombardment. Human workers provided the determination and labor that turned plans into reality. Commander Taeyang walked through the reconstructed downtown district. The memorial wall was complete now, bearing the names of every human and allied soldier who had died defending the colony. Thousands of names carved in stone, each one representing someone who had chosen to fight rather than run. A group of Velara youngsters were playing near the memorial, their parents watching carefully. One of the children approached Taeyang, recognizing his uniform. "Are you a warrior?" the child asked in careful human language. Taeyang knelt down to the child's level. "I'm a defender." "There's a difference. Warriors fight for glory or conquest. Defenders fight to protect people like you." "Like at Velara Prime?" the child asked. "My parents as humans saved our world." "Humans helped," Taeyang corrected gently. "But your people fought too. Everyone who stands against cruelty is a defender. Species doesn't matter." The child thought about this seriously, then nodded. "When I grow up, I want to be a defender too." "Then the galaxy will be safer for it," Taeyang said. And meant it. Engineer Yunji was spending her time training allied species in what had become known as human engineering philosophy. It was not about superior technology, but about mindset. She taught Velara engineers how to repair systems under combat conditions. She showed Myrani technicians how to jury-rig solutions when standard parts were not available. Most importantly, she taught them that failure was not the end, just another problem to solve. One of her Velara students asked a question that revealed the cultural gap. "But Director Yunji, what if the repair fails? What if we push systems too hard and they break completely?" Yunji smiled. "Then you learn why they broke and try something different. Humans have failed more times than most species have attempted. That's why we're good at succeeding eventually. We're not afraid of failure. We're only afraid of giving up." The student considered this, then returned to his work with new determination. Around the training facility, similar scenes played out as species learned from each other. The Velara taught patience and long-term thinking. The Myrani taught efficiency and group coordination. The Thel taught adaptability and quick decision-making. And humans taught relentlessness. Captain Minho, who had fought at Velara Prime alongside Hyunwoo, was given command of the first joint species warship. The vessel was named Unyielding by vote of the Alliance members. Its crew included humans, Velara, Myrani, and 3 other species. They trained together, learned each other's languages and customs, and forged bonds that made them more than just a crew. During a training exercise, a Velara weapons officer made an error that would have been minor on a single-species ship. On the Unyielding, where everyone was still learning to work together, it caused confusion and a simulated systems failure. Minho addressed the crew calmly. "Mistakes happen. What matters is how we recover. Human military tradition says that the best learning comes from fixing our errors. So let's figure out what went wrong and make sure it doesn't happen again. No punishment, just improvement." The Velara officer, who had expected harsh discipline based on his species' military tradition, looked surprised. "You're not angry?" "I'm practical," Minho replied. "Anger doesn't fix problems. Understanding does. Now walk me through what happened so we can all learn." This approach spread through the Alliance military. Instead of rigid hierarchies and punishment for errors, they developed a culture of shared learning. Species taught each other, learned from failures, and grew stronger together. Admiral Hyunwoo, from his new headquarters on Earth, coordinated Alliance forces across multiple sectors. His command staff included representatives from every member species. They argued constantly, their different perspectives clashing, but those arguments led to better strategies than any single species could develop alone. During one command meeting, a debate erupted about how to handle a potential Krell sighting near Alliance space. The Velara representative advocated for defensive positioning. The Myrani wanted immediate investigation. The human tactical officer suggested a show of force to deter aggression. Hyunwoo listened to all perspectives, then made his decision. "We send a mixed species task force, strong enough to fight if necessary, but with clear orders to gather intelligence first. We show the Krell we're unified and capable, but we don't provoke a fight unnecessarily." It was a compromise, but more importantly, it was a decision that incorporated wisdom from multiple viewpoints. The Krell came with everything they had. 300 bioships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the new Sol system. the largest human colony outside of Earth's solar system. Intelligence had predicted the attack, but predictions did nothing to soften the reality of facing such overwhelming force. Commander Tae-yang stood on the bridge of the destroyer Dauntless, promoted after his actions at Velara Prime. He was only 28 years old, far too young to be defending a colony of 2 million people. But youth meant nothing when humanity needed defenders. Reading massive energy signatures, his sensor officer reported. 300 confirmed Krell vessels, ground forces deploying toward the planet's surface. Tae-yang had 15 human destroyers and a population that refused to evacuate. When he had given the evacuation order 2 days ago, the response from the colony governor was simple. This is our home. We'll fight for it. Now the Krell were here and there was no more time for debate. All ships, this is Commander Tae-yang. Battle Formation Alpha. We make them pay for every meter of space. He switched to the planetary defense channel. Surface Command, you're going to have company soon. Make them regret landing. On New Sol's surface, Engineer Yoonji was no longer just an engineer. She had been appointed Director of Planetary Defense, a title she had accepted reluctantly. Now she stood in the main operations center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Krell approach. They're targeting our population centers, her tactical officer said. Same pattern as Velara Prime. They want to harvest the maximum number of people. Yoonji felt cold fury settle in her stomach. Then we make the cities into traps, release the civilian defense protocols. Every able-bodied person gets a weapon and a position. Turn every building into a fortress. Ma'am, civilian casualties will be enormous, the officer protested. Casualties will be worse if we do nothing, Yoonji replied. These are humans. Give them a chance to fight and they will. Trust them. Across New Sol, civilians received the call to arms. Factory workers picked up rifles. Teachers learned how to operate anti-armor weapons. Children were moved to the deepest shelters while their parents prepared to defend their homes. It was chaos. But it was organized chaos driven by a simple human truth. We protect our own. In orbit, Tae-yang's small fleet engaged the Krell armada. It was suicide by any rational calculation. 15 ships against 300. But humanity had stopped relying on rational calculations months ago. Focus fire on their landing craft, Tae-yang ordered. Every ship we destroy up here is hundreds of ground forces that won't reach the surface. The human ships moved with coordinated aggression, targeting the large bio-vessels designed to carry Krell warriors to the surface. Kinetic rounds punched through organic hulls. Missiles detonated in clusters, spreading destruction. The Krell returned fire with overwhelming force, but human ships kept moving, kept fighting. The destroyer Stalwart took a direct hit that sheared off half its hull. Captain Yoon, commanding the dying vessel, made a final decision. All crew to escape pods. I'm taking us into the enemy formation. His ship, engines still firing despite catastrophic damage, rammed into a Krell carrier vessel. The explosion destroyed both ships and damaged 3 others nearby. It was a trade of one for multiple. Mathematics that made sense only if you valued your mission more than your life. Tae-yang watched comrades die and kept giving orders. His voice remained steady even as his ship shook from impacts. Dauntless to all vessels. We've stopped 40% of their landing force, the rest are getting through. Surface Command, prepare for ground contact. On New Sol's surface, the first Krell drop pods slammed into the outskirts of the capital city. The pods were organic, pulsing things that split open to release warriors. Each Krell soldier was 3 meters tall, covered in bioarmor, armed with living weapons that fired acid and razor projectiles. They expected easy prey. They found humans waiting with mining explosives buried in the streets. Sergeant Da-eun, who had fought on Velara Prime, was leading the defense of the industrial sector. She had 50 Marines and 200 armed civilians. The civilians were scared, but they held their positions. Wait for it, she said calmly, as Krell warriors advanced down the street. Wait until they're in the kill zone. The Krell came closer, confident in their superiority. Da-eun triggered the detonator. The street erupted in flames and shrapnel. Dozens of Krell went down and the survivors found themselves taking fire from every window and doorway. Keep moving, Da-eun ordered. Hit and run. Don't let them establish a position. This was urban warfare, humanity's oldest and most brutal form of combat. The Krell were used to overwhelming force in open terrain. They had never fought an enemy that turned every building into a fortress and every street into an ambush site. In the residential districts, families fought from their homes. Parents with hunting rifles fired from upper windows while their older children loaded ammunition. It was desperate and terrifying, but it was also effective. The Krell advance slowed to a crawl as they took casualties from unexpected directions. Engineer Unji watched the battle unfold from the operations center. Reports came in constantly. Casualties were high, but the humans were holding. More importantly, they were adapting. Civilians were learning Krell tactics in real time and finding weaknesses. "Ma'am, we have a problem," her tactical officer said. "Krell forces are converging on the primary reactor facility. If they take it, the city loses power." Yunji looked at the display. The reactor was heavily defended, but not enough for the force heading toward it. She made a decision that would haunt her but was necessary. Set the reactor to overload if they breach the inner perimeter. If we can't hold it, we deny them the resource. That will create a radiation zone across half the city, the officer said, horrified. "Better radiation than extinction," Yunji replied coldly. "Do it." At the reactor facility, the defenders received the new orders. Many of them lived in the areas that would be irradiated if the reactor exploded. They stayed anyway. If the choice was between losing their homes and losing their species, the choice was simple. The Krell assault on the reactor was massive. 200 warriors supported by bio-armor constructs that served as living tanks. The human defenders, numbering only 80, prepared for a last stand. Then the Velara arrived. 3 ships dropped, out of faster-than-light travel, and immediately engaged Krell forces on the ground. The amphibious species had brought every combat vessel they could muster. It was not much by military standards, but it was everything they had. Behind them came the Marani, the insectoid species who had visited Earth months ago. Then the Thel. Then 3 other younger species from the Council. They had all chosen to stand with humanity against the Krell threat. Commander Tae Yang, still fighting in orbit despite his ship being held together by emergency patches, felt hope surge. "All Allied vessels, welcome to New Sol. We could use the help." The Velara commander, speaking through translation, replied simply, "You came when we called. We come when you call. This is what honor means." The battle shifted. The Krell still had numbers, but the Allied forces had something more valuable: the willingness to sacrifice for each other. Velara ships covered human vessels, taking hits meant for their allies. Myrani ground forces landed and fought alongside human civilians, their combat doctrine adapting on the fly to match human urban warfare tactics. On the ground, Sergeant Daun linked up with a Velara combat team. The amphibious soldiers were not natural urban fighters, but they learned quickly. Together, human and Velara forces counterattacked, pushing the Krell away from critical infrastructure. At the reactor facility, the arrival of Myrani air support broke the Krell assault. The insectoid species used tactics similar to human dive bombing, their ships coming in dangerously low to provide close support. It was reckless, and exactly what the situation needed. The battle for New Sol lasted 3 days. By the end, the city was scarred, thousands were dead, and entire neighborhoods were destroyed, but the city stood. The Krell, having taken unprecedented casualties, withdrew. They had expected easy prey and found a coalition willing to bleed together. Captain Hyunwoo arrived with reinforcements on the 3rd day, too late for the worst fighting but in time to help secure the victory. His new flagship, a vessel built with contributions from 7 species, landed on New Sol to provide aid and recovery support. He found Commander Tae Yang on the bridge of the barely functional Dauntless. The young officer looked like he had aged a decade in 3 days. "We held, sir," Tae Yang said quietly. "We actually held." "You did more than hold," Hyunwoo replied. "You proved that species can stand together. That courage is contagious." Engineer Yunji met them at the landing zone. She was covered in dust and exhaustion, but her eyes were bright. The Krell are withdrawing across multiple sectors. Intelligence says they're pulling back to reassess. This is the first time they've retreated strategically in 70 years. They're afraid, Taeyang said. They've never fought enemies who fight for each other instead of themselves. On the streets of New Seoul, humans and aliens worked side by side to clear rubble and rescue survivors. Velara used their aquatic abilities to fight fires. The Indomitable screamed through space toward the largest Krell bioship hanging over Velara Prime. Every alarm on the bridge was blaring. The ship was not designed for this kind of direct assault, but Hyunwoo knew that tactics and strategy only mattered if you survived long enough to use them. Target locked, Taeyang announced. His hands were steady despite the fear in his eyes. Krell ship is 3 times our size. Their weapons are charging. Yoonji, how are my engines? Hyunwoo asked. From the engineering bay, her voice came through with a mix of stress and determination. Reactor is at 120% and climbing. I've shut down life support in non-essential sections. We've got maybe 10 minutes before something critical breaks, but we'll be fast and angry until then. Hyunwoo smiled despite the situation. This was the human way. Other species optimized for efficiency and safety. Humans optimized for winning, even if it meant pushing every system past its limits. All power to forward weapons. Let's make an impression. The Indomitable opened fire at close range. Kinetic rounds punched through the Krell bioship's outer membrane. Missiles followed. Conventional explosives that other species considered primitive. The Council preferred elegant energy weapons that disabled rather than destroyed. Humans preferred weapons that worked. The Krell ship shuddered under the assault. Its bio-armor was tough, designed to regenerate damage, but it had never been hit with such concentrated firepower from something so small. The creature ship screamed, a sound that came through on multiple frequencies and turned its attention to the Indomitable. Incoming fire, Taeyang warned. Brace for impact. The Krell weapons were biological horrors, firing projectiles that were alive and hungry. They slammed into the Indomitable's hull, acid eating through armor plating. The ship shook violently. On the damage display, entire sections went red. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, Yoonji reported, sealing bulkheads. Structural integrity at 70%. Any Council species would have retreated at this point. 70% integrity was unacceptable risk. But Hyunwoo kept the Indomitable on course, firing continuously. Target their propulsion organs. If we can cripple them, the other Krell ships will have to respond. More human ships were arriving now, dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the system's edge. Destroyers, frigates, even a few science vessels that had been retrofitted with weapons. None of them were military powerhouses, but together they represented something the Krell had not expected. A species willing to fight. Captain Min-ho of the destroyer Relentless contacted Hyunwoo. We're here, old friend. What's the plan? Hit them everywhere at once, Hyunwoo replied. Don't give them time to organize. Protect the population centers on the surface. And Min-ho, don't hold anything back. Wouldn't dream of it, Min-ho said, and his ship dove into the battle. The space around Velara Prime turned into chaos. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed reckless to observers, but were actually carefully calculated aggression. They accepted damage that would make other species withdraw. They used their ships as shields when necessary, protecting each other with a coordination born from shared culture rather than hive-mind connection. On the planet's surface, the situation was equally desperate. Krell ground forces were advancing on Velara population centers. The amphibious natives had retreated to underground shelters, but those would not hold forever. Hyunwoo made a decision. Taeyang, prep the drop teams. We're going down there. Sir, we're in the middle of a space battle, the young officer protested. And those people down there are in the middle of an extinction. Marines to the drop pods, now. Within minutes, human Marines were falling through Velara Prime's atmosphere in armored pods. They landed hard in the middle of Krell-occupied territory. Exactly where Council doctrine said they should not be. But humans did not follow Council doctrine. Sergeant Da-un led the first squad into the ruins of a Velara city. The Krell ground forces were massive insectoid creatures the size of vehicles. They moved with hive precision, tearing through buildings to reach the shelters below. Spread out, Da-un ordered. Use the urban terrain. Make them come to us. The Marines set up positions in collapsed structures using rubble for cover. When the Krell came, the humans opened fire with weapons designed for one purpose, stopping threats permanently. The Krell had thick carapaces and redundant organs. Humans had bullets, grenades, and the willingness to get danger close if that's what it took. One Krell warrior charged Daon's position. She held her ground until the last moment, then triggered a mine she had placed. The explosion tore through the creature's legs. It fell and Daon finished it with precise shots to its head cluster. "They can be killed," she reported over the squad channel. "Just takes more rounds than usual. Aim for joints and head structures." The battle on the surface turned into brutal close-quarters combat. The Krell had numbers and biological advantages. Humans had tactics refined through thousands of years of warfare against each other. They used ambushes, flanking maneuvers, and fighting retreats that turned into traps. Above the planet, Yunji was performing miracles, keeping the Indomitable functional. The ship had taken dozens of hits. Life support was minimal. Gravity generators were failing, but the weapons still fired, and that was what mattered. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Krell command ship," Tae Yang announced. "I think they're preparing to bombard the surface. If the Krell started orbital bombardment, the Velara in the shelters would die. The human marines would die. Everything they were fighting for would be lost." Hyun-woo did not hesitate. "Full power to engines." "Ram course, sir?" Tae Yang looked shocked. "You heard me. Set collision course with that command ship. All hands prepare for immediate evacuation. Yunji, set the reactor to overload on my command." "Captain, you'll die," Yunji said quietly. "Maybe, but they'll definitely die. Fair trade." Hyun-woo activated ship-wide communications. "All hands, this is the captain. Evacuation pods are launching in 60 seconds. Everyone off this ship except bridge crew." "That's an order." Across the ship, crew members scrambled for evacuation pods. Some hesitated, not wanting to abandon their captain, but discipline and trust won out. If Hyun-woo said this was necessary, it was necessary. Yunji appeared on the bridge, having run from engineering. "I'm not leaving either. If you're doing this, someone needs to make sure the reactor actually explodes." Tae Yang stood from his station. "With respect, sir. If the bridge crew is staying, then I'm bridge crew." Hyun-woo looked at his two officers and felt pride swell in his chest. This was humanity. This was what made them different. "All right. Strap in and hold on. Let's show these things what humans do when we're desperate." The Indomitable accelerated directly toward the Krell command ship. The massive biovessel tried to turn, tried to bring weapons to bear, but it was too slow and the human ship was too fast. Yunji had the reactor running at levels that should have been impossible. Every safety system bypassed. Pure human engineering stubbornness keeping it together. At the last moment before impact, Hyun-woo triggered the evacuation pod for the bridge crew. Yunji, Tae Yang, and Hyun-woo were thrown into the small capsule as it ejected from the Indomitable's hull. Through the pod's small window, they watched their ship slam into the Krell command vessel. The reactor went critical a split second after impact. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface, a brief new sun in the sky. When it faded, both ships were gone. Debris rained down through space, burning up in the atmosphere. The Krell fleet, suddenly leaderless, faltered. Their hive coordination broke down into confusion. Human ships pressed the advantage, picking off biovessels one by one. On the surface, the Krell ground forces began retreating to their landing sites, no longer receiving commands from orbit. The evacuation pod containing Hyun-woo and his crew was picked up by the destroyer Relentless. Captain Minho greeted them personally. "You crazy bastard. You actually did it." Hyun-woo was bruised and exhausted, but he smiled. "Did it work?" "The Krell are withdrawing. We're winning." Minho clasped his friend's shoulder, "And more of our fleet just arrived. Admiral G1 brought everything we have." Over the next 2 days, the human fleet systematically cleared Krell forces from the Veltra system. They took casualties. Ships were lost. Hundreds of Marines died on the surface fighting to protect Velthara civilians. But they won. When it was over, the Velthara emerged from their shelters to find their cities scarred but standing, and human soldiers standing guard. The amphibious beings looked at these strange mammals who had traveled across space to save strangers, who had fought with such ferocity for people they had never met. One elder Velthara approached Sergeant Dayun, who was tending to a wounded squad mate. "Why?" the elder asked in translated speech. "Why did you come?" The council said no one would help. Dayun looked up, her armor scorched and dented, exhaustion in every line of her face. Her answer was simple. "Because you asked." The council chambers were designed to intimidate. Located on a station that orbited a neutron star, the massive chamber held representatives from 47 different species. Some were beings of pure energy contained in crystalline shells. Others were hive minds speaking through organic avatars. A few existed as digital consciousnesses projected through holographic displays. They were ancient, powerful, and very unhappy with humanity. Admiral G1 stood in the center of the chamber, a single human surrounded by civilizations that had been traveling the stars when Earth was still figuring out agriculture. She wore her dress uniform, the medals on her chest representing conflicts the Council had never heard of. Behind her, projected on massive screens, were images from Velara Prime, the devastation, the casualties. The Victory Counselor Vexthor of the Luminari spoke first. His kind were beings of living light, immortal and incomprehensibly old. Admiral, your species has committed a grave error. You intervened in a conflict without Council authorization. You used weapons of mass destruction in a populated system. Your casualties were unacceptable by any civilized standard. Explain yourself. G1 looked up at the glowing entity without fear. 2 billion Velara are alive because we acted. That's my explanation. You risked your entire species, another counselor said. This one a quarry whose species existed as a collective consciousness. The Krell could have retaliated against human space. Your recklessness could have started a war. We were already at war, G1 replied coldly. We just didn't know it yet. The Krell were testing Council response. They attacked the Velara because they knew no one would stop them. We proved them wrong. At what cost? Vexthor's light pulsed with something that might have been anger. You lost 4 ships. 347 of your people died. This is not how advanced civilizations solve problems. G1 took a step forward. The Council chambers had protocols about personal space, but she ignored them. You want to know the real cost? The cost of your inaction? While you debated for 3 days, the Krell killed 40,000 Velara. Men, women, children. They died while you talked about diplomatic channels and measured responses. She gestured to the screens behind her. We recorded everything. Your people can watch it all. The Velara sending their final messages to families they'd never see again. Children crying in shelters. And you in these chambers discussing protocol while people died screaming. The chamber fell silent. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably in whatever passed for seats in their species configuration. We are not barbarians, Vexthor said, but his light dimmed slightly. We simply understand that some losses are acceptable to maintain greater peace. Acceptable to who? G1's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. When did you decide that someone else's extinction was an acceptable price for your comfort? We heard them calling for help. We answered. If that makes us barbarians in your eyes, then I'll wear the title proudly. On Earth and across human colonies, the debate was being broadcast live. Billions of humans watched their admiral stand alone against the galaxy's oldest powers. In bars and living rooms, on military bases and civilian stations, people watched with pride and anger as their representatives spoke truth to beings who had forgotten what sacrifice meant. Captain Hyunwoo had been invited to testify as well. He stood beside G1, his uniform still showing scorch marks from the battle. When he spoke, his words were simpler but no less powerful. My engineer, Yunji, kept my ship flying with duct tape and prayers, he said. My tactical officer, Tae Yang, planned an assault that should have been suicide. My crew followed me into a battle we couldn't win using conventional thinking. We didn't have time for your elegance or your careful calculations. We had time to act, so we did. A younger counselor representing the Thel who had only joined the council 2 centuries ago spoke up. But is this not simply glorifying violence? Your species has a documented history of warfare. Perhaps this aggression is simply your nature. Hyunwoo smiled grimly. Yes, we have a history of violence. We fought over resources, territory, and ideas. We nearly destroyed our own planet, but we learned something through all that blood and fire. We learned that the strongest among us have a responsibility to protect the weakest. We learned that survival alone isn't enough. You have to have something worth surviving for. Engineer Yunji had become an unexpected celebrity across the human networks. Her transmission during the battle, broadcast on emergency frequencies, had been picked up by media everywhere. Reactors at 140% and hull integrity is at 30%. So what? We're human. We don't need optimal conditions to win. The recording had spread beyond human space, translated into dozens of languages, shared by species who were starting to question council wisdom. She was not at the council chambers. She was on Velara Prime, helping repair critical infrastructure. When reporters found her, she was covered in grease and working alongside Velara engineers. "Do you have any comment on the council proceedings?" a journalist asked. Yunji looked up from the power coupling she was repairing. "I hope they're having a good debate. Meanwhile, there's actual work to do here." She gestured to the Velara beside her. "These people lost everything. Their homes, their families, their sense of safety. We can't give back what they lost, but we can help them rebuild. That matters more than politics." The Velara engineer working with her spoke up. "The council abandoned us. Humanity saved us. Whatever those old species decide doesn't change that truth." Across the galaxy, similar sentiments were spreading. The younger civilizations, those who still remembered struggle and survival, began questioning the council's authority. If the ancient powers would not act to prevent genocide, what purpose did they serve? 3 species sent delegations to human space requesting meetings. They wanted to understand humanity better. They wanted to know if this willingness to fight for strangers was real or just propaganda. Admiral Jiwan met with them personally. The delegation from the Mirani arrived first. They were an insectoid species, advanced but not ancient. Their representative, a being named Clickwur in translated speech, asked the question directly. "Why do you fight for others? What do you gain?" Jiwan took them to a memorial wall on Mars. On it were carved the names of every human who had died in the Velara intervention. 347 names. "We gained this," she said. "The knowledge that when we died for something that mattered." "Can your council say the same?" Clickwur touched the wall with a delicate appendage. "Our people have been afraid for so long. We follow council directives because we believe we have no choice, but you chose differently." "Fear is natural," Jiwan said, "but letting fear control you, letting it stop you from helping others, that's when fear becomes cowardice. Humanity has been afraid plenty of times. We just decided that some things are worth being brave for." Back in the council chambers, the debate continued for days. The divisions were becoming clear. The ancient species, comfortable in their power and safety, wanted to censure humanity and reaffirm traditional policies. The younger species were increasingly vocal about the need for change. Then the Krell responded. They released a message across council space. It was simple and chilling. Humanity has been designated a primary threat. The Hive commits resources to their elimination. The council chambers erupted in chaos. A direct Krell threat had not been issued in 70 years. The ancient powers suddenly realized that humanity's actions had consequences beyond the Velara system. Counselor Vexthor's light burned bright with urgency. "You see? Your recklessness has provoked them. The Krell will attack human space and possibly ours in retaliation." Jiwan laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Now you're worried? When it's your safety on the line? Where was this concern when it was Velara lives?" "This is different," another counselor protested. "This threatens the entire regional stability." "No," Hyunwoo said, stepping forward. "This reveals the truth. The Krell were always a threat. They were always going to expand. We just refused to be easy prey. Now they have to commit resources to a real fight instead of picking off defenseless species one at a time." Jiwan addressed the entire council. "You have a choice now. You can censure us, push humanity away, and face the Krell alone with your millennia of cautious retreat. Or you can accept that maybe, just maybe, a young species that still remembers how to bleed has something to teach you about courage." The vote took another day. In the end, the council split. 23 species voted to censure humanity. 24 voted against. It was the closest vote in council history. The censure failed, but barely. More importantly, 7 species formally announced they would stand with humanity if the Krell attacked. They were all younger civilizations, species who had only joined the council in the last few centuries. They had watched what happened at Velara Prime and decided they wanted to be the kind of people who answered calls for help. Counselor Vexthor, in a moment of rare honesty, admitted something publicly. "We have lived so long that we forgot what we were protecting. Perhaps it takes a young species to remind us what courage looks like. The council will not censure humanity, but neither will we commit to their defense if the Krell attack." The bridge of the Indomitable hummed with the usual sounds of deep space patrol. Captain Hyunwoo sat in his command chair, watching the stars drift past on the main screen. His ship was old by human standards, built 30 years ago during the early expansion era. The hull had scars from a dozen small conflicts, and the engines made a grinding noise that engineer Yunji swore was normal. But it was home and it was reliable. Yunwoo had been in space for 15 years. He remembered when humanity first made contact with the Galactic Council, how excited everyone was to meet ancient civilizations that had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. The reality was disappointing. The Council species were advanced, yes, but they were also cautious to the point of paralysis. They talked endlessly about problems but rarely acted to solve them. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Tae-yang from his station. The young officer was fresh from the academy, still eager and idealistic. He reminded Hyunwoo of himself 2 decades ago. "It's a distress signal, but it's not using standard protocols." Hyunwoo leaned forward. "Put it through." The transmission was broken and filled with static, but the terror in the voice was clear. The speaker was Velara, one of the amphibious species that lived in the Outer Rim. Their civilization was known throughout the galaxy for beautiful art and peaceful philosophy. They had no military to speak of, relying on Council protection like so many others. "This is Velara Prime," the voice said, choking on words. "We are under attack. The Krell are in our system. They've destroyed our orbital stations. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. They're landing on the surface. Our people are dying. Please." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by silence. Tae-yang looked at his captain with wide eyes. "Sir, the Krell haven't attacked anyone in 5 years. The Council said they were contained." "The Council says a lot of things," Hyunwoo replied. He activated his communication system. "Get me Admiral Jiwon. Priority channel." While he waited, Hyunwoo pulled up data on the Velara system. It was 3 days away at maximum speed. The Velara had a population of 2 billion spread across their homeworld and 3 orbital habitats. They were completely unprepared for war. The Krell, on the other hand, were bred for it. The hive-minded species consumed other civilizations, breaking down their biological matter for resources. They were efficient, ruthless, and terrifying. Admiral Jiwon's face appeared on the screen. She was in her 60s with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. She had fought in the colony wars, back when human factions were still fighting each other over resources. That experience made her practical in ways the Council could never understand. "I heard it too," she said before Hyunwoo could speak. "I'm already pulling reports from Council space. They're debating what to do." "Debating?" Hyunwoo felt his jaw tighten. "People are dying right now. I know. That's why I'm not waiting for them to finish talking." Jiwon's expression was hard. "I'm mobilizing every ship we have in the sector. I need you to get to Velara Prime as fast as possible. Hold position until the fleet arrives. With respect, Admiral, one ship won't make a difference against a Krell assault." "Maybe not, but one ship can send a message that someone is coming. That someone heard their call." She paused. "The Council will condemn this. They'll say we're being reckless and aggressive. They'll probably try to sanction us." Hyunwoo smiled grimly. "Better to ask forgiveness than permission." "Exactly." She won out. The connection closed. Hyunwoo turned to his crew. "You all heard that. We're going to Velara Prime. It's going to be dangerous and we might not survive. If anyone wants to transfer off, now is the time." Nobody moved. Yunji spoke up from her engineering station. "Captain, I can push the engines to 110% capacity. We'll get there in 2.5 days instead of 3. It'll be rough on the ship, but she can handle it." "Do it," Hyunwoo ordered. "Tae-yang, start preparing tactical scenarios. Assume we'll be outnumbered and outgunned." "Yes, sir," the young officer replied, his fingers already moving across his console. As the Indomitable accelerated toward the crisis, Hyunwoo opened a channel to the rest of the human fleet. The response was immediate. Captain after captain confirmed they were changing course. Supply ships, science vessels, even civilian transports were volunteering to help. Some were days away, others more than a week, but they were all coming. In council chambers across the galaxy, the debate continued. The luminary argued that intervention would destabilize regional politics. The Quarry worried about resource allocation. The Thelborn suggested a diplomatic envoy to negotiate with the Krell. They talked and talked while people died. Hyunwoo watched the countdown timer on his screen. 58 hours until they reached Velara Prime. He wondered if there would be anyone left to save by the time they arrived. The Krell were efficient. They could strip a planet of life in days. Yunji appeared beside his chair, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one and took a sip from her own. "The crew is scared," she said quietly. But they're also proud. This is what we joined the fleet for, to help people. The council thinks we're crazy, Hyunwoo said. The council has been safe for so long they've forgotten what it's like to be desperate. Yoonji looked at the stars on the screen. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the resource wars on Earth. She said humanity survived because we never gave up, even when things looked hopeless. We fought for every inch of ground, every drop of water. Maybe that's what makes us different from the ancient species. We still remember how to fight. Hyunwoo nodded slowly. And we remember what it's like to need help and not get it. 2 days later, the Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velara system. What they saw made the crew fall silent. Orbital stations were shattered ruins, debris fields spreading like clouds. Krell bioships swarmed around the planet, their organic hulls pulsing with horrible life. On the surface, cities were burning, scanning for survivors, Taeyang reported, his voice tight. I'm reading. A lot of Velara life signs still on the planet. They're scattered, probably in shelters underground. And the Krell? Yunwoo asked. Hundreds of ships in orbit, ground forces on the surface in every major city. Taeyang looked up. Sir, there's no way we can fight them all. We don't have to fight them all, Hyunwoo said. We just have to make them think twice about easy prey. Gunji, power up every weapon we have. Taeyang, pick the biggest Krell ship you can find. We're going to hit it hard. Captain, Yunji said carefully, one attack won't save the planet. No, Hyunwoo agreed, but it will tell the Velara that they're not alone. That help is here. And it will tell the Krell that humans don't run away from a fight. He gripped the arms of his chair. All hands, battle stations. Let's show them what humanity does when someone asks for help. The Indomitable accelerated toward the Krell fleet, weapons charging, one small human ship against an army. Behind them, across vast distances of space, the rest of humanity's fleet was coming. They were coming with fire, with steel, and with a simple message that the galaxy had forgotten. No one fights alone.